Eggs in Space!
Hello and welcome to another episode of MTG Lore with Eggs, where we tell some of Magic's oldest, newest, and most interesting stories as told by eggs. And this time, we're going where no egg has gone before. Space! Well, kind of space. It's essentially space. It's complicated, but we'll get into that. But before we get into that, do consider giving this video a like, and check out some of our previous entries in our Lore with Eggs series, including our take on every mainline Final Fantasy game. And of course, consider subscribing so you can stay up to date on even more Lore with Eggs knowledge, as well as a whole bunch of other Magic the Gathering related content. Commander games, podcasts, you name it. And with that all out of the way, let's get started on telling you the full story of Magic the Gathering's latest set, Edge of Eternities, as told, as usual, by Eggs. Chapter 1, we got some world building. There's a lot of stuff we gotta cover. This is Magic the Gathering's first step into something far more sci-fi, and I gotta say they really have nailed the feel of it. The atmosphere, the tone, all of it, really top-notch space opera and space horror vibes. And the level of technology almost makes the mysterious and more magical parts feel more magical in comparison. Our story takes place in the Edge of Eternities, aka outer space. Sort of. Well, let me explain. The Edge of Eternities is the space around the multiverse we've come to know and love. Separated by an impenetrable barrier called the Chaos Wall, the people living on the Edge developed on various planets. And to be clear, planets are not the same as planes, and planes aren't the same as planes. Or planes, but those ones seem more obvious. And have discovered faster than light technology, thanks to some aliens who could already do it called the Drix. With the Pinnacle, aka Starfleet, connecting the various solar systems through the currency of being nice to each other, and unaware of the various planes on the inside of the Chaos Wall. Well, other than that the Eldrazi came through there at some point, and the Heffalumps of course. But just like Star Trek, life is complicated, and we've got a few groups vying for control of the Sothera system, which is where the focus of our plot is. One of them wants to use the semi-blown-up star to summon their god, who is definitely not an Eldrazi Titan. And no, we don't actually know for sure, but I got a feeling. And the other uses math to do an ends justifies the means thing, and to keep stars burning. All while the Pinnacle connects the universe, modeled after a technique called weft walking, which is planeswalking in space but with extra steps, that only one alien species can do naturally, though that species is more focused on their own mysterious goals, and hunting down Eldrazi remnants. There's a space god emperor, a bunch of terraforming bugs, intelligent Kavu, all sorts of robots, and also Tezzeret. And we, the reader, are following the narrative of an unknown thing, and being guided to make events work for that thing's own goals. We'll call it the Steve MacGuffin. Still following after all that? If so, then great. If not, rewatch the first part. Or don't, this isn't a choose your own adventure thing. Let's narrow the scope down somewhat. Chapter 2, The Scary Door. We meet Sammy, a down-on-his-luck plucky space scavenger. He's got a rinky-dink ship, a no-nonsense Kavu co-pilot named Tanik, and a cat named Miri. No, not the regular one. This one's just a cat. And Miri's weft walked away again, because all cats can weft walk, which makes sense in our world and in this one. That's why cats are never where you think they're going to be, or they are where you think they're not going to be. Sammy might be looking to make, well, not money, because they don't have that here in space, but enough goodwill to keep his ship flying, and maybe even a job. But he's also super loyal to his cat, so he's got to track her down. Textbook abandonment issues, but sweet nonetheless. I imagine his dad left for space cigarettes and never came back. Anyhow, they're currently working for the Metal Man, who is clearly Tezzeret. And the Metal Man sent them to what should have been a mining colony called Sigma's Reach that never started up to pick up an artifact. And that's where things start to get creepy, because the place sure as hell looks lived in, even though the robot AI that's in charge of it insists it had never been occupied. And things get more eerie the more he looks. Food left cooking on stoves, records of children which shouldn't have been possible in this timeline, empty spacesuits that are still warm, petrified burnt glass outlines that look like people disintegrated, and the computer keeps giving them plausible and possible but very off-feeling explanations for all of it. I got serious chills reading this. Anyhow, he ends up at the heart of all this weirdness, where he finds the artifact, aka our story narrator, aka Steve MacGuffin. And he has some very unsettling visions of his and the colony's death before he wakes up back on his ship, rescued by Tannic. But Sammy's touched Steve McGuffin now, and something feels very, very wrong. Just what does Steve McGuffin want? Chapter 3, A Tale of Two Cities. And by cities, I mean enemies in space. After another cryptic story start, which gave us some more knowledge on the Monoists and the Sunstar Summists, and their military, the Free Company, we meet Alpharad. Alfariel, who's dreaming about falling. And by dreaming, I mean having a horrifying nightmare. He's part of the Monoists, the death cult that wants to make a bunch of super voids to call to their mysterious god, bring the universe to its inevitable dark end, and go to the next universe, their promised paradise. And in this dream, he's seeing his sister as she plummets into the void, being viscerally pulled apart and realizing with horror that he wanted her to stay.
No!
That he should have said something, and that the super void only promises death and not paradise. Yeah, they're really not pulling any punches with these descriptions. It's a lot. Messed up over the guilt of not having stopped his sister, and worse, questioning their faith altogether, Alpharad does the logical thing of volunteering for a literal suicide mission by strapping a mini black hole bead on his forehead, with the goal of being sent to blow up the Free Company's big warship, the Dawnsire. See, the Monoists have this technology called the Sherazade, which will slow down time for them in a bubble right when they hit the ship. It lets them play a sub-game in this time bubble to take out the ship before momentum and time catches up and they all go splat. They're quite literally playing a Scheherazade minigame, which is very peak flavor wins. Like, it just tickles you in the right way. When Alpharad comes to terms with the fact that he's about to die, he freaks the freak out. But we pause with Alpharad and his freaking out to head to the Candela, which is the Dawnsire's shield ship, where the space knight Sir Vondum is getting all armored up by his squire Halia. See, the Summists are the complete opposite of the Monoists. They see life and stars as a miracle, and they'll do anything to make it last longer. And by anything, I do mean anything. If it adds up to a greater good in the long run, a few exploding stars and trampled innocents along the way is a reasonable price. They're the ends justifies the means people. Halia, for her part, is also questioning the logic of her faith, wondering what one would do if something told them to make a choice that the sum, which is their big holy math problem, didn't tell them to do. She doesn't get much time to dwell on this questioning before the alarms go off and her knight are headed to intercept the aforementioned Monoists. And like Alpharad, Halia has questions about fate when she discovers from this star person, who's the captain of their ship, and can kinda see the future, that her knight, Sir Vondum, is prophesized to die in the battle to come, and she's very much not a fan of it. Vondum is resigned to it, because he thinks his death can make the universe better because the math problem said so. But Halia isn't ready to accept that just yet. Two people on opposite sides of a war, both with regret for things their universe tells them they can't change, and questioning what their faiths tell them is the right way to think and believe, and some things that can't be altered, unless a certain Steve McGuffin artifact decides otherwise. Chapter 4, A Tale of Two Cities. Except those cities are factions, and they're about to fight each other. We go back and forth between Halia and Alpharad as we follow the battle between these two factions. The Monoists are digging and tearing their way into the ship and turning themselves into mini black holes along the way, while the Summists are digging their way down to fight back. And fate, or a certain Steve McGuffin, brings the two of them together, with both of them trying to kill the other. Halia is determined to save her knight, and Alpharad, when faced with the inevitable, and also having lost a hand in this whole fighting thing, realizes that he wants to live. He takes that singularity black hole bead on his forehead and throws it away, and it goes right through Sir Vondum's head. And here's where Steve McGuffin gives us another choice. Do we let Alpharad live or die? Though it makes it very clear it's not accepting any outcome other than the one that it wants, because somehow it knows all possible endings and how they affect it specifically.
The choice is now yours.
The first one, the high heel.
No. We'll do a redo. You're supposed to want to know.
You're doing this one. I just gave you a choice so you could feel some sense of control.
So there is no option one?
No, you.
so we gotta choose to give him mercy. Did I mention that Steve MacGuffin is breaking the fourth wall in the story and repeatedly talking to the reader? Well, it does, and it's kind of really cool. The star person, Captain Slats, after hearing Alpharad admit that he wants to live, gives him that mercy. They say that Servandum died to convert him into seeing the value of life, and so he's earned himself a chance to live. If he can make it down to an escape ship in the next 3 minutes with only one hand, before the Scheherazade splats him like a bug.
50 grand still within reach here if he learns to... Oh!
While he's off scrambling, we have a daytime soap opera level plot twist. Servandum is alive? Sure, he's got a literal hole through his head, but he's not dead either, and seemingly without crippling brain damage. No downside at all. Halia's still pissed at Alpharad for trying to kill him, of course, and Vondum's pissed at Captain Slats for having let him go, but Vondum then has a strange sensation, a realization that something else is, in fact, altering things to happen in just the way it wants them to happen. Putting that prophecy in the captain's head so Servandum would be ready to die, Alpharad realizing he wants to live so that he would throw the black hole so it would go through Servandum's head so that the captain would see him as converted and will him to live so that something in the future might just use him for its purposes later, and Vondum being alive might still be part of its plans. This very much unsettles the knight. Servandum is worried that all of his choices from now on will be at the behest of something that will work against the grading of the sum. Chapter 5. When worlds and ships collide into worlds. Anyhow, let's catch back up with Sammy and Tan, who are still missing their cat. The two of them manage to get their rinky-dink ship, and Steve MacGuffin, who's in the glove compartment, over to Caveron, that is, the home planet of the Kavu, or rather what's left of it, seeing as most of it has shattered. Long story short, the Kavu knew that their star was gonna blow up, so they strip-mined their planet to evacuate, destabilizing the whole thing and causing it to fall apart. In the irony of ironies, their actions are what attracted the Pinnacle and the Monoists to show up, and the Monoists turned their star into a supervoid rather than let it explode in a supernova, which meant that the Kavu were down one planet and their star wasn't gonna blow up, which is pretty rough, but you know, that's how it happens sometimes. Turns out a shattered planet is a pretty good place to hide too, and to find things that were hidden. Tanik is bringing Sammy to this planet in order to get a stable container to hold this artifact. Tanik used to be in the Navy, well, the Space Navy, for the Kavu, and he hit some caches at one point with stasis casks. But before they can get to it, they end up with some unexpected company. A Kavu memorial salvage crew arrives and is holding them at gunpoint. And, around the same time, a Summist ship shows up above them. Though the ship is more of an issue because it's literally about to crash into them. Sammy, being the hapless hero that he is, goes to rescue the pilot. And, surprise, surprise, it's our guy Alpharad, and looking very, very uncomfortable. I'd say it was a strange coincidence that he happened to get through the ruined planet's rock-filled atmosphere and crash land right next to Sammy, but I think we're pretty clear beyond coincidences at this point. And also, Steve MacGuffin pretty much tells us how much Sammy loves strays. Even though this could feel really contrived, it actually works really well. This story's very good. Sammy manages to convince the Kavu that they're with the Monoists, and they need a stasis cask in order to preserve a very dangerous object. The Kavu, for their part, insinuate that Tanik had made a very big mistake in their past. Sammy knows about it too, but we'll get filled in on it later. The Kavu decide that they're going to try and arrest them, and take them back to their town so they can check out their story. But they get even more suspicious once Alpharad is given Steve MacGuffin and then starts floating. Turns out that Steve MacGuffin is able to do quite a bit, and is going to use whatever power it has to get Sammy, Alpharad, and Tanik away from the Kavu that are trying to arrest them, all to guide them towards what it calls the inevitable end. It also gives Alpharad a glimpse of the MacGuffin's true master, but it's very vague. See, it's always nice when you align yourself with Steve MacGuffin, the all-powerful artifact that can alter the plot, as long as, you know, you're getting it where it wants to go. Chapter 6. The Aftermath of a Miracle. It's pretty crazy. Steve MacGuffin isn't so nice for the Kavu though, because they get heavily irradiated from Alpharad's emergency landing. because Steve McGuffin shifted the past to put them there to be irradiated. But even more crazy is that Steve McGuffin grew Alpharad's hand back. It's got a hole in it, but like, damn, this thing is crazy. While Sammy and Tanuk are taking the irradiated Kavu to get medical treatment, we find out what happened to Tanuk that got him exiled from his people. You see, the Kavu are accepting of disasters. If something happens and it kills millions of people, but it happens all on its own, then, you know, it's fate. That just kind of happened. But if someone tries to avert a disaster, even if it is to save a larger group, and a smaller one pays for it, then they've gone and made themselves responsible for their deaths. Which Tanuk did, and it's why he never makes choices anymore. The Kavu have pretty much solved the old trolley problem quite neatly. Sammy manages to take the dying Kavu to a nearby town, and they're able to get some quick medical treatment, as well as cover their tracks. See, they think humans are kind of just like birds that mimic stuff, so they very easily are able to play dumb, quite literally. It's also revealed that the Kavu thought that Sigma's Reach was both populated and mining, because this rare mineral called moxite had been flooding the system and lowering the favor prices. Not money prices, but it makes their whole eerie visit to the place even stranger, because obviously no one was there, and no one had apparently been there. It's a mystery that only gets mysteriouser. But that gets put on pause as the Summist Free Company arrives to track down, presumably, Alpharad for the whole suicide mission and attempted murder thing. Luckily, the Kavu are very big fans of sticking it to the man. Chapter 7, Playing Cat and Mouse with the Sunstars. Surprise, surprise, it's Halia and Sir Vondum, and they're going after Alpharad. And Vondum seems set on killing him, because he's got to take out that whole twist of fate thing he was feeling, or at least end whatever manipulations are going on, and killing Alpharad is the best way to do it. Halia's concerned about her knight, what with the whole hole going through his head and brain, but she's still along for the ride. Of course, Sir Vondum's actually right on the money, in thinking that there's an object that's manipulating possibilities to make certain things happen, and he thinks it's a threat to the big math equation in the sky. His real concern is that if the object ends up with the monoists, they're gonna throw it into the black hole. And if they do that, it'll have access to every past that ends in a black hole. Which, knowing how the universe works, is literally everything. You can really say this plot has a lot of holes. Sir Vondum wants Halia to nuke the entire town while he's inside of it, to hopefully destroy anybody who may have come into contact with the object, but she's really not a fan of, wholesale massacres. She decides she's gonna go down herself, and she uses some math logic to explain all of it. But she also has an ulterior motive. Alpharad, for his part, is having another dream, where he sees both the ends of the universe and also the unknowable nature of the universe compared to sentient beings. See, I usually dream fantasy adventures myself, but then again, I've never touched Steve McGuffin. When he wakes up, Alpharad is determined to get back to Steve McGuffin, but he finds himself locked in the ship. After he fingers his hole a little bit, he discovers that it can see through things. And, even more useful, he can reach through it to interact with stuff on the other side of stuff. It's basically like a little mini portal gun, except he doesn't have to shoot it or nothing. He uses it to unlock the ship from the outside and heads for Steve McGuffin. Sammy, meanwhile, is making the connections that Steve McGuffin might have something to do with this weird luck they're having, because the Free Company keeps just barely managing to not see them. Improbably managing to avoid attention even. And Sammy thinks this might have been the same thing that happened on Sigma, changing the past of the place to give them the best possible way to get to Steve McGuffin, which meant that everybody who lived there now didn't live there and are elsewhere. Halia uses her own math and logic to quite literally narrow down alternate futures to the single one that she wants, and the single one in which she's doing what she's doing. It makes sense when she says it, trust me on this one. Alpharad, however, wants to use the MacGuffin to try and get away, so Halia tasers him a few times. She sticks a literal bomb in his mouth and tries to coerce him to use the artifact to swap her in Sir Vondum's place back on the ship, so she'd be the one who got the hole in her head, and so that she can fulfill her duty as a squire and spare her knight from what's happening to him. When Sir Vondum radios in, Halia tries very, very hard to convince Sir Vondum to blow them all to smithereens and make things right, but things get even crazier, because because Sammy and Tannik arrive, and Halia straight up kills them. Like, she stabs Sammy through the heart and slashes Tannik's throat, and Akavu needs a lot of cuts to get through their very thick throats. But like, seriously, this story gets really wild with the visceral descriptions. You should check it out. She turns back to Alpharad, only to see that he's used his holy hand trick to stab this knockout drug he picked up on the ship into her skin. But again, not like through the armor, but like around the armor. It's just madness. Chapter 8, a plot twist and a massacre. And when Sammy and Tannik get to the docks where the ship is, they trip on some wires and don't get killed. Wait, but them getting murdered did happen, except that it didn't, like a whole lot of other things. And Sammy had seen this whole them getting murdered thing back on Sigma, when he had first touched Steve McGuffin. That Steve McGuffin is really doing some numbers. We hear over the paralyzed Halia's radio that the Free Company is gonna carpet bomb their location in 2 minutes, which gives Steve McGuffin 2 minutes to get them all out of there. With Halia and Alpharad in the back, Sammy and Tan make a break for it, and the Free Company decides to just eradicate the town with lasers and bullets, and perhaps most horrifically, with a literal nuclear blast when they turn the fusion engine on their ship onto the town. It's genuinely horrifying. They have no chill at all. And Halia, once her suit filters out the paralytic agents and helps her recover, gets on the radio to try and convince Sir Vondam to blow them out of the sky, which he won't do. But as much as she's trying to argue with Sir Vondam to follow through and to hold on to her faith, this very literal massacre is something that she just knows inside of herself to be fundamentally wrong. Even though Sir Vondam is saying that the math is mathing, but her empathetic math is not mathing with the holy math, so there's that. Sammy saw all of this happen on Sigma too, except it didn't happen there, it's happening here, because Steve McGuffin changed stuff to make it happen here instead of there. This thing is really overpowered. Sammy and the crew drive their ship in a death-defying escape of the planet, while the Cavaron Navy is swarming their previous location, aiming to get some revenge for the town that just got massacred. Even though Halia and Alpharad are very much at odds with each other, Sammy has named them both guests. And in this future space-time place, you just can't break the law of good manners. The two of them hash out some of their feelings on their current situation, with Halia doing a lot of math around what happened and coming to the same conclusion. The sum had said to do it, but she knew it was wrong. So something isn't correct, either it or her. And they should still blow up Steve McGuffin. But Sammy objects to this because it's meant to be his payday. Funnily enough, it's actually the missing cat that ultimately convinces both Alpharad and Halia to work with him, something so mundane that they can both connect to it. It's almost as if the missing cat was intentional. Either way, Sammy has decided they're going to bring the artifact to the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Metal, also known as Tezzeret. Chapter 9. Here comes Tezzeret, and he's got a plan. On the float, Halia and Alpharad are getting used to their new circumstances, the former especially, but the two of them eventually take time to talk to each other about what they did and why, and what they want to do. By the time Tezzeret arrives, they're not quite friends, not quite enemies, but they at least seem to understand each other a bit more. So, acquaintances? Frenemies? Distant co-workers? Tezzeret makes the same intimidating entrance that he usually does, body made of dark steel, and referencing things these space people have never heard of, like Llanowar. It almost feels like he's thinking out loud, mostly to hear himself talk and sound like a jerk. He's a big fan of outer space, where there seems to be an infinite amount of resources, and Halia and Alpharad rub him the right way, for now. Tezzeret is the one who gives Steve McGuffin its actual name, the End Stone, which honestly is not quite as catchy, but we'll probably swap back and forth, and he seems to know quite a bit about it, such as how it wants to go back to its master. Tezzeret also explains why he's doing it. Tezzeret is in this to just meet the person who controls the artifact. He's been ruled by tyrants and elder dragons and Phyrexians for long enough, and he's not interested in repeating the process. That's also why he doesn't claim the stone for himself, which is some serious personal growth. Apparently, losing all the mana colors on your Planeswalker card can really change a guy. Tezzeret pulls out a map and wants to ask the stone where it wants to go. And the stone makes it very clear to the reader just where it's aiming for. And it strongly insists on this, ignoring any attempts by you, the reader, to go elsewhere. But it does hint at some insider knowledge about the worm wall, the asteroid belt around the system, as being a more final end goal. It's also a bit funny to see Tezzeret, who's probably 80% metal at this point, and yet he's not able to work a lot of this fancy space tech stuff. I mean, he normally wouldn't need it because he's got magic, but it is funny seeing him being an old man trying to work a computer. The stone points to a place of gravitational balance between Cythera, the supervoid, and the gas giant of Uthros, which is apparently a good place to park things. So that's where we're headed. Tezzeret also finds an unintentional reference to people who watch gates very, very amusing. He's really in a chuckly mood, which is kind of nice to see. We get a brief sidebar with a bug lady named Mantis, who's in charge of the Infinite Guideline, the big Pinnacle-run space station that has the Eternity column, aka the means to send people to other systems. And it seems that both the Monoists and Summists are moving forces to blockade the place, as Vondam, who's currently imprisoned there for the whole massacre thing, and is very good at holy math, figures out and tells her. They might risk their bases of powers being destroyed, but if the enemy gets the artifact to another system, or if the artifact chooses to make the improbable possible and lets Sammy and the crew escape, it could threaten the entire Edge itself, whether it's in the wrong hands or its own. And surprise, surprise, the Infinite Guideline is exactly where the Endstone wants to go. So, yay for that. Back on Sammy's ship, Tezzeret wants to use the stone to make anyone in their way disappear, or be turned into his cronies, or goons, if you will, which does sound very much like Tezzeret. But Sammy wants to do exactly what Vondam and Mantis had theorized, try and deceive their way onto the Infinite Guideline, set the Monoists and Summists against each other, and then try to steal an Eternity Engine ship to get away. Just as improbable as you might think, but we do have the Endstone. And yet, despite all of this, Sammy still can't think of leaving the system without Miri. Honestly, his reasoning is really quite admirable. If Miri had been a wife or a sister or even a stranger, people will understand him needing to find them. But because she's seen as a lesser being, she's also seen as not being worth that effort. But Sammy thinks that the fact that she is a lesser being means she should be treated better than a person, because that's how greater beings should treat lesser ones. It would be nice to think of gods or higher powers caring more about lesser beings like us, at least enough to make sure we're alright, rather than thinking we're not worth the effort. Halia and Alpharad have another bit of talking, trying to figure out their own code of morality that can't be shifted by outward forces, even if they align with those forces from time to time. The Pinnacle, the Faith, Cythera, the Endstone, all of them try and influence them to do one thing or another, but they need to figure out what they want. Shortly after, the Ilvoi show up, which is a species of jellyfish people who live on gas planets. And this particular Ilvoi, Momenon, has been working with Tezzeret and is here to help him with his plans. And whether their experiences or adventures, or some deeper convictions that they always had, like Sammy knowing that the correct choice can't always be right, or if it really is just the Endstone, making a bunch of changes in the past to get to this point, the crew has decided they're ready to either convince or heist their way out of the system, and go wherever the Endstone wants them to. Chapter 10, The Standoff at the Guideline. The Monoists and Summists are having a big, tense standoff, and the Infinite Guideline is caught right in the middle. And Sammy and crew are headed through the fray. Halia briefly wavers on her conviction, but after some convincing, the group follows through their set plan of trying to play both sides. And it seems to work alright, considering no one's shooting them out of the vacuum. When they land on the station, Sammy and Tannik go and meet Mantis. And apparently she's quite the looker for a bug lady. Well, at least Sammy seems to think so. And statistically, she is the ideal beauty, because there are a lot more bugs in the system than any other species. She and Sammy are actually pretty straightforward with each other, telling them the various info that they know about the artifact, and a Drix who's on the station and might be there for it. But just as their meeting is wrapping up, something very strange happens. A bunch of tiny holes are suddenly shot through the deck, filling the space with a strange substance called potential matter. And Sammy thinks it's about to be a really bad day. I believe he likens it to being seasoned. What would a plan be without unexpected twists? And also, our hole counter is now probably broken. While this is happening, Alpharad and Halia are floating around the station to try and get at one of those fairies from the outside. Their foray around the place gives them a great view of the lack of fairies, and the aforementioned holes being punched in the station, and something else approaching. And we see from Sammy's view the Eldrazi that's been lured to the station by all that potential matter, which means it's time to run. How the hell is an Eldrazi here without a Titan? I genuinely don't know. But anyhow, Halia and Alpharad do make it to one of the ferry docks, where Alpharad decides to spout off a minute's worth of numbers to unlock the gate. And perhaps surprisingly and unsurprisingly, that doesn't work. Unsurprising because trying to guess a password that long is statistically impossible. But surprising because, like Alphared believed, he figured the stone would just give the answer to him. He and Halia have another discussion about the whole crux of the story, what they each choose to believe in, what others do because of their belief versus the influence of the stone, what Halia feels she needs to do now and her responsibility to her faith, yada yada yada. Sir Vondam arrives at this moment to break up the conversation, weapons at his side, and tells Halia that she needs to come with him, so they can take the artifact back to the Summis and face the judgment of their faith together. Oh, and also he blew up the town because of the faith, but he didn't blow up her ship because he actually cares about her, which is very sweet and very messed up. Chapter 11, our big bombastic finale, and honestly it doesn't disappoint. We pick up right where we left off, with Tan, Sammy, and Mantis running the hell away from the Eldrazi, throwing robots in its path to try and slow it down. Turns out there's more than one Eldrazi on this station, and they seem almost impossible to stop, if only because, as Tan figures, we're only seeing parts of them at any time. Trying to cut off one arm is like trying to cut off one arm. Doesn't actually stop them. Once they get to an abandoned dock, Mantis decides to hold off the Eldrazi with some robots to buy Sammy and Tan some time to try and figure out a plan to stop them. Meanwhile, whatever started this Eldrazi incursion has sparked the Monoist, Summist, and the Infinite Guideline itself into attacking each other, leading to an all-out space battle. And a battle on the station itself. Summists and Monoists and robots are all fighting, and the whole time, the Eldrazi are eating everything and everyone in their path, except for the Monoists. Curiouser and curiouser. And Halia is confronted by her knight. Sir Vondam is begging her to come back with him so that they can face this judgment for their failure and choices. But Halia comes to a realization that if she goes with him, she'd be betraying her faith, because she'd be saying that murdering innocent people is the right way to lead to a better tomorrow, and she can't accept it. And so, with a few words more, Knight and Squire, who both still care deeply for each other, strike with lethal force. Sammy and Tan are looking to use a nearby ship's engine to try and electrocute the Eldrazi. Apparently they're very conductive, and Sammy's opening every crate to find a cable they can use. And he finds his missing cat? He barely gets a moment to see Miri before the Eldrazi scare her away again, and he doesn't even have the time to panic because the Eldrazi's there and they need to fry it. And it seems it was super effective. But then the other Eldrazi barrels into Tan. And then we cut away, of course, because we're back to Halia and Vondam. They're fighting back and forth, and she knows that she can't beat him fairly. They've trained for years, after all. Vondam tells her that the Sum called for the Kavu to die, not him, which helps her resolve some of her own issues with her faith. But another thing he says gives her a very brutal idea. As Vondam closes in on her, she throws herself between Alpharad and Vondam, absorbing all of Vondam's stabs and strikes so that Alpharad can sandwich her between them, reaching his holy hand around to the back of the knight's neck and letting Halia reach through the hole and snaps the vertebrae of his neck. Like, she literally uses another person's space hole hand to reach her hand through another person's neck and physically pop the joints. Like, holy, this is brutal and amazing. Back to Sammy and Tan. Tan looks like he's gonna be a goner, but then they're rescued at the last moment by the Drix that's on the station, who introduces themselves as Barrow, or Tumulus, kind of both. Plot convenience, contrivance, sheer luck, or something else. He tells them that he managed to save Mantis, that they all need to take a shower and wash off that potential matter or they'll become anything, and that cats suck. And then poofs. Now that Sir Vondam's got a broken neck and can't do anything, Halia and Vondam get to talk again, and Vondam is begging her to kill him, mostly because he believes his very existence is something that will lessen the Sum by working against the big math problem in the sky. But then Halia tells her that she thinks the holy math problem has been mismathed. And so she's got to make it lesser in the hopes that it will fix itself to make room for mercy and lead to a better answer. Halia says she probably won't see him again, but Sir Vondam promises that she will. After all, she's his failure and his responsibility. And with that, she and Alpharad leave. Sammy and Tan make it back to their ship, running right into a Monoist Gravkill Paladin, who, after shrugging off a stab to the chest that did nothing, tells them that the Monoists are going to help them escape because they think the End Stone is something with their god. He also wants to meet Alpharad and the stone, but before he gets to, Tezzeret arrives and crushes him into a very messy metal marble. He's all full up on goons at the moment, reached his goon limit if you will, and he's not interested in adding more. Halia and Alpharad make their way back to the Seriema, where Tezzeret has managed to dock a warp ferry to it, because of course Tezzeret already had the passkey. He's not one to be unprepared. And, surprise of all wonderful surprises, Miri the cat did in fact end up back on the ship, and Sammy is ridiculously happy. But now, they need to get ready for ludicrous speed.
Prepare ship! Prepare ship for ludicrous speed!
And then faces their immediate problem. See, the Monoists had actually put their ship in another Sherazade to try and protect them from the Summists, and because of this funky time bubble, they can't sync their ship with the Eternity column to leave. But if they leave the bubble, they're gonna get blown up. So Sammy goes and does something even crazier. He aims his ship directly at the Infinite Guideline and hits the engine as fast as he can, so that the moment they pop out of the bubble, the station can only do one thing to keep them from crashing into it, and so they get warped through eternity. Ludicrous speed, go!
What the hell was that? Spaceball 1. They've gone to plaid.
And as we come to the conclusion of the story, people start connecting the last few dots that are remaining, revealing what they knew and why. See, Tezzeret knew that the End Stone had wanted something from him, but not to claim it, since his last crew that went to take it had disappeared. So he made it his sincere intention to help the End Stone get where it needed to go. And it seems it is planning on taking them to this place at the very edge of the Sothera system, called the Garden, which is a place right next to the Wormwall. It's kind of like the Bermuda Triangle of the system, but far more weird and far less triangular. Tan also tells us about how he met Sammy, who had been a cook and a helper on a science ship that had been destroyed by the Wormwall, attacked by some unknown monstrous aliens, because they had gone on a mission to try and talk to the creatures they thought might live there, and the End Stone is bringing them right back to the place that killed that ship. Just then, all of their computer screens are cut out, giving them one brief view of something seeming to wrap a giant hand around the ship, before going blank, and then a mysterious being shows up right in front of them, looking more construct than creature, and also part starscape, which is very pretty. The creature puts its hand on Alpharad's cheek, tells him that he has been touched by the core and blessed, and Alpharad drops like a sack of potatoes, almost like his mind has been overwhelmed. Halia, seeing this happen, leaps to attack, and her molecular blade even cuts off two of this entity's figures, before it catches her by the throat and crushes her windpipe. The being then turns to Tezzeret and tells him that it smells the Chaos Wall on him. It also gives a bit of description as to what it is, calling itself the last thing. It also takes a brief notice of Sammy, telling him that some stories do need a dragon and a knight, and that if he can try and find it, he should try and do so to destroy it. It won't change the end of all their stories though. Sammy decides to get a head start on it with his sword right now, but the creature poofs away and is gone, along with the End Stone. With the being now gone, the rest of the crew rushes over to help Halia and Alpharad, except for Tezzeret, who seems to have gotten something very substantial out of this meeting, not to mention those cut off fingers he called dibs on. He even muses that its movement reminded him of a planeswalker. Sammy barely has a moment to pet his cat, who is staring at that creature the whole time, before going to help his friends. There are a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of mystery still hanging, but at least for now, he has Miri, so some things are working out all right. And that is it, the totality of the Edge of Eternity's story. I hope I was able to put across just how genuinely good this story was. Like, I read a lot of Magic stories, as you may know, but I think this is probably one of the best ones I've read in years. The world has so much depth to it, the characters' actions are well thought out, the conflicts between them are juicy, the descriptions visceral. I would honestly recommend, if you'd like, go and actually read the story yourself too. It's a really fun experience. But all of that said, thank you guys for watching and listening to my little egg story in space. If you had fun, go ahead and hit that like button and leave a comment below of your favorite part of the story or what you're looking forward to as Magic goes in this new and unprecedented direction. It makes a big difference. And consider subscribing, because there are going to be more egg stories in the future, and there's plenty of other stuff to check out on this channel too. But with that being said, we're gonna wrap up here, and I'll catch you on the sunny side.